Have you ever wondered what it truly means to find yourself? The teacher's voice echoed softly in the dimly lit room, where a circle of students sat cross-legged, eyes wide with curiosity. Their master was known for his deep wisdom, and they had all come hoping to find some of that insight within themselves. One of the students, a young man named Arun, raised his hand timidly. "Master, is it something we can find through study and learning, or must we experience it?" The teacher smiled, his gaze gentle yet knowing. "Ah, Arun, that is the question at the heart of all journeys, isn't it? Can wisdom be taught, or must it be lived?" He paused for a moment, letting the question sink in. The other students leaned forward, eager for the answer, but the teacher remained quiet, allowing the silence to become part of his lesson. After what felt like an eternity, he spoke again, this time softer, more reflective. "Many years ago, there was a man, not so different from you, who asked the same question. His name was Siddhartha. Born into a life of privilege, he had everything one could desire: wealth, knowledge, and the respect of his peers. Yet, he was restless, yearning for something more, something deeper." The teacher's eyes scanned the faces of his students. He believed that wisdom could be learned from teachers, from scriptures, and through ascetic practices. But what do you think he found on his journey? The students looked at each other, unsure of how to answer. Arun finally spoke. "I suppose he learned that wisdom comes from within?" The teacher nodded. "Yes, but the path to that realization was neither easy nor straightforward. Siddhartha's story is one of exploration, of extremes, and of surrender. And like him, each of you will need to find your own path, one that may lead you through doubt, desire, and suffering before you find your truth." With that, the teacher began to tell the full story of Siddhartha, and the students listened intently, knowing that within this tale lay the answers they sought. Hermann Hesse, the influence of Buddhism and Eastern philosophy in Siddhartha. Hermann Hesse, 1877 to 1962, stands as one of the most profound literary voices of the 20th century. His works resonate with readers across the globe, offering a deep reflection on the complexities of human existence and the perpetual quest for self-discovery. Yet among his many creations, one novel seems to shine with unparalleled brilliance: Siddhartha. Have you ever felt lost, like no matter where you turn, answers elude you? In Siddhartha, Hesse grapples with the same feelings, leading us through a spiritual odyssey that pulls from the wells of Eastern philosophy, especially Buddhism, Hinduism, and Taoism. Hesse doesn't just present a story, he opens a door to the mysteries of life and invites you to explore its depths. Are you ready for that journey? From the opening lines, Siddhartha pulls us in, leaving us breathless as we follow the protagonist's search for enlightenment and truth. Hesse's own life, shaped by his exposure to Eastern thought, permeates every chapter, every word. Through the fictional Siddhartha's quest, Hesse asks the essential question: can enlightenment ever be truly taught? Or must each of us discover it for ourselves, through our own trials, successes, and failures? 1. Hermann Hesse's background and early influences. To truly appreciate Siddhartha, we must first step into Hermann Hesse's shoes. Born in the picturesque Black Forest of Germany, Hesse was surrounded by nature's quiet splendor, but his upbringing was far from idyllic. His parents were missionaries who had worked in India, a world of spirituality so different from his own Lutheran Christian environment. Isn't it fascinating that, even as a child, Hesse was touched by the whispers of the East, long before he would consciously embrace its philosophies? Growing up in such a strict Christian household left a deep mark on him, but not in the way his parents had hoped. As a teenager, Hesse rebelled. He questioned everything, especially religion. And don't we all reach that stage at some point? That phase where the stories we've been told seem too simple, too rigid. For Hesse, this rejection of institutionalized Christianity didn't lead to atheism but rather to a passionate exploration of Eastern philosophy. His spiritual crisis during World War I would become a turning point, pushing him deeper into introspection. It was then that he discovered Carl Jung's psychoanalysis, which must have been a revelation. Jung's ideas about the integration of the self mirrored the paths to enlightenment found in Eastern traditions. This merging of East and West became a central theme in Hesse's work. How could it not? He had lived it, struggled with it, and ultimately, wrote about it. His entire life seemed to culminate in one burning question: how do we, as individuals, find peace in this chaotic world, too? Plot overview of Siddhartha. What is the meaning of life? That is the very question Siddhartha, the protagonist, sets out to answer. The novel, set during the time of the historical Buddha, tells the story of a man's quest for enlightenment. But here's where it gets interesting. Siddhartha is not the Buddha himself. He's a fictional character who, like us, is seeking wisdom in a confusing world. From the very start, Siddhartha's dissatisfaction is palpable. Raised in a privileged Brahmin family, surrounded by knowledge and rituals, you would think he'd be content. But no, his soul is restless. Haven't we all felt that way? Like something is missing. Even when life seems perfect on the outside? Siddhartha's discontent with the teachings of the Brahmins, his hunger for something more, feels so relatable. He embarks on a journey, leaving behind his family, status, and comfort. He becomes an ascetic, depriving himself of worldly pleasures, but this too leaves him unsatisfied. Hesse masterfully shows us that enlightenment isn't found in extremes, not in indulgence, but not in denial either. At this point, don't you find yourself asking, if neither the path of wealth nor the path of poverty holds the answer, then where do we look? It's a striking moment when Siddhartha, after years of self-denial, begins to live fully in the world. He meets Kamala, a courtesan, who teaches him about love, and Kamaswami, a merchant, who introduces him to the world of wealth. You almost want to scream, Siddhartha, don't lose yourself. But that's the beauty of his journey. He must lose himself to find himself. Isn't that a truth we often overlook in our own lives? As Siddhartha indulges in the material world, his disillusionment grows. Wealth, sex, and power, it all feels hollow in the end. Hesse is gently guiding us, the readers, to reflect. Do the things we chase truly bring us happiness, or are they distractions? Have you ever chased a dream only to find it wasn't what you thought it would be? Siddhartha's realization that his pursuit of wealth is just another trap is a moment of profound insight for all of us. His salvation comes not in riches or love but by the river, where a humble ferryman named Vasudeva helps him see life for what it truly is, ever-flowing, ever-changing. It's breathtaking, isn't it? The river, a symbol so simple, yet so profound. Siddhartha learns that enlightenment isn't some distant goal, it's right here, in the ebb and flow of life, in the acceptance of change and impermanence. 3. Buddhist influence in Siddhartha. Buddhism. The heart and soul of Siddhartha's journey. Have you ever found comfort in the idea that suffering is a part of life? It sounds paradoxical, but that's one of Buddhism's most profound teachings, the recognition of dukkha, or suffering. And the realization that our attachment to things, whether physical or emotional, only deepens that suffering. Siddhartha's story is full of moments where he must let go, must detach, in order to grow. Hesse, through his deep understanding of Buddhist philosophy, weaves this theme throughout the novel. The middle way, one of Buddhism's core concepts, is so beautifully portrayed in Siddhartha's life. After years of extreme asceticism, Siddhartha realizes that neither depriving himself nor immersing himself in pleasure can lead to enlightenment. How often do we fall into extremes in our own lives, thinking the answer lies in all or nothing? Siddhartha's journey reminds us that balance is key. Perhaps one of the most moving symbols in the novel is the river, representing anicca, the Buddhist idea of impermanence. The river flows endlessly, never stopping, never staying the same. Life is just like that, isn't it? Always moving, always changing, even when we try to hold on. Have you ever tried to hold on to a moment, only to realize it slipped through your fingers? The river teaches Siddhartha, and us, that wisdom comes from accepting the flow, from understanding that nothing in life is permanent. And that's okay, as Siddhartha watches the river, he comes to see the interconnectedness of all things. This, too, is a cornerstone of Buddhist thought, pratitya, or dependent origination, which teaches that everything is interconnected. What a humbling realization! We are all part of a greater whole, and Siddhartha's enlightenment comes from embracing that interconnectedness, from understanding that every person, every moment, is part of a larger, ever-flowing existence. 4. Hindu and Taoist influences, but Buddhism isn't the only philosophy at play in Siddhartha. Hesse also draws heavily from Hinduism, the ancient religion of India. The concept of Atman, the true self or soul, and Brahman, the universal spirit, are central to the novel. Siddhartha's journey can be seen as an effort to reconcile his Atman with the Brahman, to understand that his soul is a part of the greater universe. Don't you sometimes feel that same yearning? To understand your place in the world, to feel connected to something larger than yourself. Hinduism's belief in the cyclical nature of life, reincarnation, karma, the eternal flow of birth, death, and rebirth, is reflected in the novel's symbolism. The river, once again, comes to embody these ideas. As Siddhartha sits by the river, he begins to see the cyclical nature of life. Everything comes back around. Every joy, every sorrow, every birth, and every death, they are all part of the same eternal cycle. Isn't that comforting in a way? To know that nothing is truly lost, that life continues to flow, and then there's Taoism. How could we forget the influence of this Chinese philosophy? With its emphasis on harmony with the Tao, the way, the flow of the universe, is subtly present in Siddhartha. Taoism teaches us to go with the flow, to live in harmony with nature, and Vasudeva, the ferryman, embodies this ideal. He's not in a rush. He's content to live by the river, to listen to its wisdom. In many ways, Vasudeva is a Taoist sage, showing Siddhartha, and us, that the answers we seek are already around us. We just need to be still and listen. 5. Siddhartha's relationship with the historical Buddha. One of the most fascinating aspects of the novel is Siddhartha's encounter with the historical Buddha, Gautama. Imagine meeting the very person whose teachings have inspired your journey. Yet, in a surprising twist, Siddhartha chooses not to follow the Buddha's path. Why? Because he realizes that true enlightenment cannot be taught, it must be experienced. What a daring message Hesse gives us here. He's telling us that no matter how wise our teachers are, no one can walk our path for us. We must discover our own truths, through our own experiences, no matter how painful or difficult that might be. It's a profound moment when Siddhartha, after meeting the Buddha, acknowledges his greatness but also insists on finding his own way. It leaves us wondering, can we ever truly find wisdom in someone else's footsteps, or must we, like Siddhartha, forge our own path? 6. Conclusion. The enduring legacy of Siddhartha. As you close the final pages of Siddhartha, you can't help but feel changed. This is no ordinary novel. It's a guide, a companion, a mirror reflecting our own deepest questions and struggles. Hesse has done something remarkable. He's bridged the gap between Eastern and Western thought, between philosophy and lived experience, between self and other. Siddhartha's journey teaches us that enlightenment isn't a destination but a process, a flow, like the river itself. It's about embracing life in all its forms, from the mundane to the sacred, from the painful to the joyful. And isn't that what we're all searching for? That sense of peace, of unity, of understanding. So, I ask you, where are you on your journey? What lessons are waiting for you by the river? Hesse's Siddhartha doesn't provide answers, it provides a space for you to find your own. And in that, perhaps, lies its greatest gift. As the teacher reached the final moments of Siddhartha's story, the room was thick with silence. The students were hanging on to his every word, captivated by the journey they had just traveled through in their minds. The teacher, sitting calmly at the center, let out a soft sigh, a smile playing on his lips, and so, by the river, Siddhartha found what he had been seeking all along, the teacher said quietly, his voice barely more than a whisper. Not through renunciation or indulgence, not through the teachings of others, but through the simple act of listening. The river taught him everything: the flow of life, the unity of all things, and the peace that comes when we stop searching and start being. The students were still, absorbing the weight of the lesson. Finally, Arun, who had asked the first question, spoke again. "Master, does this mean that we, too, must stop searching and simply live?" The teacher smiled, his eyes warm with understanding. "It means that searching is part of living, Arun. You see, Siddhartha didn't stop searching until he understood that there was nothing to find outside of himself. The river was always flowing, always present, but Siddhartha had to experience the suffering, the joy, and the confusion to truly hear it. You, too, will search. You must. It's the nature of the human spirit. But remember, there is wisdom in silence, in being present with life. Just as it is." He paused, letting his words settle into the quiet room. "Your journeys will be different from Siddhartha's, but the lesson remains the same. Enlightenment, wisdom, peace, whatever name you give it, is not something that comes from the outside. It's within you, in this moment, in every moment. The river is flowing through your life as well, right now." The students exchanged glances, some nodding thoughtfully, others still processing what they had heard. Arun looked down at his hands, deep in thought. The teacher slowly rose to his feet, signaling the end of the lesson. "You will face challenges, doubts, and distractions, just as Siddhartha did. But when the noise of the world overwhelms you, remember the river. Remember that wisdom lies not in seeking something far away, but in listening to the life that flows through you every day." With that, the teacher bowed gently, and the students followed, rising one by one. As they left the room, their hearts were lighter, their minds a little clearer, knowing that their journey, like Siddhartha's, would continue, but perhaps with a bit more patience, a bit more stillness. And as the last student stepped out, Arun turned back, catching the teacher's eye. "Master," he said softly, "I think I understand now. The journey is the lesson, isn't it?" The teacher smiled, a glint of pride in his eyes. "Yes, Arun. The journey is the lesson." And with that, the teacher returned to his seat, his heart at peace, knowing that the seed of understanding had been planted.